The winter air bit through Anna's thin jacket as she walked down the crowded street, her violin case clutched tightly against her chest. The case was old and worn, the leather peeling at the corners, but she held it like it contained all the treasure in the world. In many ways, it did. The sky above Madrid had turned a deep gray, promising rain or maybe even snow. Anna couldn't decide which would be worse. Rain would soak through her shoes, but snow would make it impossible to play outdoors. Not that anyone had stopped to listen to her playing for the past 3 days. Anna's stomach growled, a sharp reminder that she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The small bread roll she'd bought with her last few coins was long gone, and the hunger had moved past painful into a strange, hollow feeling that somehow made everything around her seem slightly unreal. She stopped at a corner, watching as people hurried by, heading home to warm apartments and hot dinners. Many carried shopping bags or briefcases. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, something to do, someone waiting for them. Anna had none of those things, not anymore. 6 months ago, her life had been completely different. She had been a student at the Royal Conservatory of Music, her days filled with classes, practice, and dreams of someday playing in one of Europe's great orchestras. Her teachers had called her gifted. One had even used the word prodigy, though Anna had laughed it off. She wasn't a prodigy, she just worked harder than everyone else. Then her father had lost his job at the factory. Within weeks, their careful family budget had fallen apart. Her mother had taken on extra cleaning work, and her younger brother had quit school to look for a job. But it wasn't enough. The choice had been clear: pay the rent or pay Anna's tuition. It's just for a little while, her father had promised, his eyes not quite meeting hers. Just until I find something else. You can go back next term. But there had been no new job, and soon after, no apartment either. Her parents and brother had moved to her uncle's place in a small village outside the city. There wasn't room for Anna, her uncle had explained awkwardly. Besides, she could find work in Madrid, maybe even music-related work. She was so talented, after all. 3 months of searching had yielded nothing. No orchestra was hiring. The music shops already had teachers. The bars wanted musicians who played popular songs, not classical violin. Anna had taken a job washing dishes at a restaurant. But after missing 2 shifts when she came down with the flu, they'd replaced her without a second thought. Her small savings had covered a few weeks in a shared room, but that was gone now too. For the past week, she'd been sleeping in the back room of a church where a kind priest let a few homeless people stay at night, as long as they were gone before morning services. Anna turned down a side street, drawn by the warm light and delicious smell coming from a cafe. She didn't plan to go inside, she clearly couldn't afford anything. But sometimes just being near places where people were eating and talking and living normal lives made her feel less alone. She stopped outside the window, pretending to check something in her reflection while really looking at the people inside. The cafe wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. About a dozen tables were occupied, mostly by couples or small groups. Everyone looked relaxed, happy to be out of the cold. A waitress carried plates loaded with food to a table near the window. Anna watched as she set down bowls of steaming soup and a basket of bread. The people at the table didn't even seem particularly excited about the food. They just continued their conversation, occasionally breaking off pieces of bread or taking spoonfuls of soup without really looking at it. How strange to be so casual about something so precious, Anna thought. Her mouth watered, and she unconsciously pressed her hand against her stomach. She was about to turn away when she noticed the small stage in the corner of the cafe. It was barely big enough for one person, just a slightly raised platform with a microphone stand and a stool. Currently empty, it clearly waited for the evening's entertainment. Anna stared at the stage, an idea forming in her mind. She had seen cafes like this before, places that offered live music to create atmosphere. Usually they paid their musicians something, even if it wasn't much. But even if this place didn't pay, maybe they would at least feed their performers? Before she could talk herself out of it, Anna pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the mingled smells of coffee, baked goods, and garlicky food. Her stomach cramped painfully in response. She clutched her violin case tighter as she approached the counter, where a middle-aged man with a thick mustache was writing something in a ledger. He didn't look up until she'd been standing there for nearly a minute. "Yes?" he said, his tone making it clear she was interrupting something important. Anna's voice came out as a croak and she cleared her throat. I noticed your stage. Do you have someone playing tonight? The man looked her up and down, taking in her worn clothes and unwashed hair. His expression wasn't unkind exactly, but it wasn't welcoming either. We have a regular on Fridays and Saturdays. Tonight's Wednesday. I play, Anna said quickly, patting her violin case. I'm very good. I studied at the Royal Conservatory. Something flickered in the man's eyes. Interest, perhaps, or doubt. We don't hire people off the street, he said, but his tone had softened slightly. Our Friday guy, he's been with us 3 years. I understand, Anna said, summoning every ounce of courage she had. But I wouldn't need much. I haven't eaten since yesterday, and I thought maybe I could play for a meal. She hadn't meant to be so honest, hadn't planned to admit her hunger. But something about the warmth of the cafe and the smells all around her had broken through her pride. The man's eyebrows shot up and he let out a short laugh of surprise. He glanced around as if checking whether his customers had heard this unusual request. A few people at nearby tables were looking their way now, curious about the girl with the violin case. This isn't a soup kitchen, he said, lowering his voice. We're a business. I know that, Anna said quickly. That's why I'm offering something in exchange. Real music, beautiful music. I can play anything. Classical, folk songs, even some modern pieces. The cafe owner shook his head, though he seemed more uncomfortable than angry. Look, I'm sorry about your situation, but just one piece, Anna pressed, desperation making her bold. If people don't like it, I'll leave right away. Girl, I can't have just anyone coming in off the street, and let her play. Javier. The voice came from behind Anna. She turned to see an old man sitting alone at a corner table. He had white hair and wore a neatly pressed shirt despite the casual setting. Something about his posture suggested authority, though he spoke quietly. Let her play one piece, the old man continued. What harm can it do? The cafe owner, Javier apparently, frowned, caught between refusal and not wanting to disagree with what seemed to be a regular customer. Fine, he said after a moment. One piece. But make it something people will actually enjoy, not some screechy classical thing that'll drive my customers away. Anna nodded quickly, relief washing through her. Thank you. Thank you so much. She moved toward the small stage, aware that more people were watching her now. She heard whispers, saw a few smirks. They thought this was some kind of joke or spectacle, the hungry girl begging to play for food. She felt her cheeks burn with shame, but the prospect of a meal kept her moving forward. The stage was even smaller up close, just a wooden platform raised about 6 inches off the floor. There was no music stand, just the stool and microphone. Anna carefully set down her case and opened it, revealing the violin nestled inside. The instrument had belonged to her grandmother, who had played in a symphony orchestra decades ago. It wasn't a priceless Stradivarius or anything close, but it was well made and had been lovingly maintained. Even during the worst of these past months, Anna had never considered selling it. It was her only connection to her past life, her only hope for a future. She lifted the violin from its case along with the bow. She didn't need to tune it. She had done that this morning at the church before the priest asked everyone to leave. Her fingers moved automatically, positioning the instrument under her chin, adjusting her stance. The cafe had grown quieter now. Everyone was watching, some with amusement, others with curiosity or pity. Anna took a deep breath and closed her eyes, shutting out their faces, their expectations, their judgments. For a moment, she considered playing something simple and popular, a folk tune everyone would recognize, or maybe something from a famous movie. That's what Javier wanted, something to please the crowd. But as she stood there, violin ready, a different impulse took over. If this was to be her payment for a meal, perhaps her only meal today, then she would give them her very best. Not what they expected, but what she could truly offer, something that would make them understand that she wasn't just a beggar, she was a musician. Anna opened her eyes, raised her bow, and began to play. Anna drew her bow across the strings, and the first notes of Paganini's Caprice No. 24 filled the cafe. The piece was notoriously difficult, a mountain that many professional violinists spent years trying to climb. Anna had mastered it at 17. The opening theme emerged pure and confident, floating above the murmur of conversation that still continued in parts of the cafe. Some people turned to look, their expressions curious but not yet impressed. Just another street musician, their faces seemed to say. The cafe owner, Javier, stood with his arms crossed, watching with a mixture of impatience and resignation. And then Ana reached the first variation. Her fingers began to dance across the fingerboard with impossible speed and precision. Notes cascaded one after another, each one crystal clear despite the dizzying tempo. The violin seemed to come alive in her hands. Not just an instrument, but a voice expressing everything Ana couldn't say with words. Her hunger, her fear, her determination, and underneath it all, her unwavering belief in her own talent. One by one, the conversations died. A waitress stopped mid-step, coffee pot suspended in the air. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. The entire cafe fell under a spell, woven note by note as Ana played. She had closed her eyes again, lost in the music. She didn't see the stunned expressions around her, the widening eyes, the jaws dropping slightly open. She didn't see Javier's face transform from skepticism to astonishment. She didn't see the old man in the corner lean forward, his eyes suddenly sharp and focused, like a bird of prey spotting something unexpected. The piece grew more demanding with each variation, requiring techniques that pushed the limits of what seemed humanly possible on a violin. Double and triple stops, left-hand pizzicato, harmonic passages that had to be played with perfect intonation. Ana executed them all flawlessly, her body swaying slightly with the music, her face serene despite the technical challenges. This was what she was born to do. As she approached the final, most difficult section, she opened her eyes. The cafe came back into focus, and Ana was startled to find everyone staring at her in complete silence. For a brief moment, her fingers faltered, but then she caught sight of the old man in the corner. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been unnerving, but instead felt oddly encouraging. His slight nod was all she needed. Ana launched into the final variation with renewed confidence, her bow flying across the strings in a blur. The music built to its climax, notes tumbling over each other in controlled chaos before resolving into the final statement of the theme, simpler now but transformed by everything that had come before. The last note hung in the air for a long moment. Ana lowered her violin slowly, suddenly aware of how quiet the cafe had become. Not a single person was eating, drinking, or talking. Every eye was fixed on her. Then the old man in the corner began to clap. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the entire cafe erupted in applause. People stood from their tables, faces alight with wonder and appreciation. A young couple near the front were actually wiping tears from their eyes. "Bravo!" someone shouted. "Encore!" called another voice. Ana felt her cheeks flush. It had been so long since she had played for an appreciative audience. She'd almost forgotten the rush of it, the pure joy of connecting with people through music. She bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol in a cafe setting. Javier approached the small stage, his earlier dismissiveness completely gone. His face was flushed, whether from embarrassment at his previous attitude or excitement at what he had just witnessed. Ana couldn't tell. That was, he started, then shook his head as if words weren't adequate. "I've never heard anything like that. Not in person. Not in my cafe," Ana smiled tentatively. "Thank you for letting me play." "No, thank you," Javier said with surprising sincerity. "Look, I promised you a meal and you'll get the best we have. But I want to offer you more than that." He glanced around at his customers, all of whom were still watching the exchange with interest. "Would you consider playing here regularly? Friday and Saturday evenings to start. Paid, of course." Ana blinked, sure she had misheard. "Paid, you mean with money?" A few people chuckled at that, but it wasn't the mocking laughter she'd heard earlier. This was warmer, almost affectionate. "Yes, with actual money," Javier confirmed with a small smile. "And meals on the house when you play. We can work out the details, but..." He gestured around at the cafe, where people were still watching them. "I think you can see you'd be good for business." Before Ana could respond, the old man from the corner approached. Up close, he looked even more distinguished. His white hair was neatly combed, and though his clothes weren't flashy, Ana could tell they were expensive. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who was used to being listened to. "Young lady," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of age but still strong. "That was extraordinary." "Thank you, sir," Ana replied automatically. "My name is Alejandro Vega," the old man said. "I was the principal conductor of the Madrid Philharmonic for 27 years before I retired." Ana's eyes widened. She knew that name. Everyone who studied classical music in Madrid knew that name. Alejandro Vega was a legend, a conductor who had taken the once provincial Madrid Philharmonic and elevated it to world-class status. "It's an honor to meet you, Maestro," she said, automatically using the respectful title for a conductor. He smiled, pleased at her recognition. "You studied at the conservatory?" "Yes," Ana admitted. "Until recently. May I ask with whom?" "Professor Navarro was my primary instructor." Alejandro nodded approvingly. "Elena Navarro is excellent. One of the best violin teachers in Spain." He studied Ana's face for a moment. "But she didn't teach you to play like that. That kind of musicality can't be taught." Ana didn't know how to respond. Coming from someone of his stature, this was praise beyond anything she had ever received. "Why aren't you at the conservatory now?" he asked. The question was direct but not unkind. Ana hesitated, embarrassment washing over her. She glanced around at the cafe full of people, many of whom were still watching and listening to their conversation. It was one thing to admit her situation to Javier while asking to play for food, but to explain it all to Alejandro Vega, in front of an audience? Alejandro seemed to sense her discomfort. "Why don't you come sit at my table?" he suggested. "Have something to eat and we can talk." Javier jumped in immediately. Yes. I'll bring you our special right away and some bread to start. And coffee? Or would you prefer tea?" The sudden shift from being ignored to being fawned over was dizzying. Ana carefully placed her violin back in its case before answering. "Coffee would be wonderful," she said, trying to sound normal despite the strange unreality of the situation. "Thank you." She followed Alejandro to his corner table, aware of the eyes tracking her movement across the cafe. People smiled at her as she passed. A woman reached out to touch her arm gently, murmuring, "Beautiful, truly beautiful," as Ana walked by. By the time she sat down across from Alejandro, Javier had already arrived with a basket of warm bread and a plate of olive oil for dipping. The rich yeasty smell made Ana's stomach growl audibly. She blushed, but Alejandro pretended not to notice. "Please eat," he said, pushing the bread toward her. "We can talk while we wait for the rest of your meal." Ana didn't need to be told twice. She tore off a piece of bread, dipped it in the olive oil, and took a bite. The flavor exploded in her mouth, and she had to hold back a moan of pleasure. How long had it been since she'd had fresh bread? Real food that wasn't a discarded half sandwich or a bruised apple from a sympathetic fruit vendor. "Better?" Alejandro asked after she had devoured 2 pieces in quick succession. Ana nodded, feeling slightly more human with something in her stomach. "Much better, thank you." "I had nothing to do with it," he said with a small smile. "Your playing earned you this meal, not my intervention." A waitress appeared with Ana's coffee and Javier's special, a steaming plate of seafood paella that smelled divine. Ana's eyes widened at the generous portion. "Now," Alejandro said once the waitress had left, "tell me how a violinist of your caliber ends up playing for food in a cafe, instead of studying at the conservatory or auditioning for an orchestra." There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity. Ana took a sip of her coffee, savoring the rich warmth before answering. "My family couldn't afford the tuition anymore," she explained simply. "My father lost his job at the factory and everything fell apart quickly after that. They moved in with my uncle outside the city, but there wasn't room for me." She stirred her coffee, avoiding his eyes. "I've been looking for work, any work really, but it's been difficult." "And where are you staying now?" Alejandro asked quietly. Ana hesitated, then decided there was no point in pride now. "There's a church that lets people sleep in their back room. I've been there for the past week." Alejandro's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, but not directed at her. "And your violin?" he asked. "Many would have sold such an instrument in your circumstances." Ana's hand moved protectively to her violin case, which she had placed on the chair beside her. "I couldn't, it was my grandmother's, but more than that. It's who I am. Without it, I'd truly have nothing." Alejandro nodded as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. "Eat your paella before it gets cold," he said gently. "We have much to discuss." Ana didn't need to be told twice. She dug into the paella with the single-minded focus of someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. The saffron rice, tender seafood, and vegetables tasted better than anything she could remember. She was so absorbed in her meal that she almost didn't notice when Alejandro signaled to Javier, who hurried over to their table. "Another paella for later," Alejandro murmured to him. "To go." And perhaps some soup, bread, and whatever pastries you recommend. Also to go. Javier nodded eagerly. Of course, maestro. Right away. Ana looked up from her nearly empty plate, suddenly self-conscious about how quickly she had eaten. You don't have to do that, she said. Consider it an investment, Alejandro replied with a slight smile. In your future. My future? Ana repeated, confused. Yes, he said, leaning forward slightly. Which, if you're willing to trust an old man who knows talent when he hears it, might be about to change. Ana stared at Alejandro across the table, her empty plate pushed to one side. The cafe had gradually returned to normal around them, though people still glanced their way occasionally. Some had come up to compliment her playing before leaving, each interaction making Ana feel increasingly out of place in her worn clothes and unwashed hair. What exactly are you suggesting, maestro? She asked finally. Alejandro took a sip of his tea before answering. I still have connections at the Philharmonic. They're holding auditions next week for the violin section. 2 positions are open. Ana's heart skipped a beat. The Madrid Philharmonic was one of the best orchestras in Spain, known throughout Europe for its excellence. Under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have dared to audition for at least another few years, after finishing at the conservatory and gaining experience in smaller orchestras. I'm not ready for the Philharmonic, she said automatically. Alejandro raised an eyebrow. I've conducted in Vienna, Berlin, New York. I've worked with some of the finest violinists of the last half-century. I think I know when someone is ready. He gestured toward her violin case. What you just played, that wasn't merely good technique. That was music. True music. Ana looked down at her hands. They were chapped from the cold, the nails cut short and uneven. Not the hands of a professional musician. Even if I could pass the audition, and that's a big if, I have no proper clothes, nowhere to practice, no way to prepare. Those are practical problems with practical solutions, Alejandro said dismissively. The real question is, do you want this opportunity? Did she want it? Ana almost laughed. It was like asking someone dying of thirst if they wanted water. The Philharmonic had been her dream since she was 12 years old. Sitting in the cheap seats with her grandmother, watching the violinists move as one, creating something so beautiful it had brought tears to her eyes. Yes, she said simply. More than anything. Alejandro nodded, satisfied. Good. Then here is what I propose. He leaned forward, his voice becoming more businesslike. I have a guest apartment in my building. It's small but comfortable, with a piano and enough space to practice. You'll stay there until the audition. I'll arrange for the sheet music you'll need and help you prepare. Anna's mouth fell open. You would do that for a stranger? You're not a stranger. You're a musician. Alejandro said it as if that explained everything. Perhaps to him it did. Besides, I'm not offering charity. I'm making an investment, as I said. If you succeed, the Philharmonic gains an exceptional violinist. Music wins. A small smile crossed his face. And I get to annoy the current conductor who thinks I should stay quietly retired. Ana couldn't help but smile at that. There was something refreshingly honest about the old conductor's minor vanity. And if I fail? She asked. Then you'll have had a week of good meals, a warm place to sleep, and proper preparation. You can take Javier's offer to play here and look for other opportunities. He shrugged. Nothing lost. It seemed too good to be true. Ana had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why are you really doing this? Alejandro wasn't offended by the question. If anything, he seemed to approve of her caution. 3 reasons, he said, holding up his fingers one by one. First, talent like yours shouldn't be wasted. It's an offense against music itself. A second finger joined the first. Second, I'm bored. Retirement doesn't suit me, but my health won't allow me to conduct anymore. Teaching, however, I can still manage. A third finger rose. And third, you remind me of someone. The last part was said more quietly, and something in his tone made Ana hesitate to ask for details. Instead, she focused on the practical concern that had suddenly occurred to her. The Philharmonic pays well, but not immediately. Even if I got in, I'd need to find somewhere to live until the first paycheck. The apartment is yours for as long as you need it, Alejandro said firmly. No arguments. Now shall we go? It's getting late and you have much work to do before next week. Ana felt like she was in a dream as she followed Alejandro out of the cafe, carrying not just her violin but also 2 bags of food that Javier had insisted on giving her. Outside, the evening had grown colder, but Anna barely noticed. Her mind was racing ahead, already thinking about what pieces might be required for the audition, what techniques she would need to polish. Alejandro led her to a sleek black car parked nearby. A driver stepped out and opened the door for them. Anna hesitated before getting in, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look in such a luxury vehicle. "Don't worry about the seats," Alejandro said, correctly interpreting her hesitation. "They've survived worse than a bit of dust." The drive took only 15 minutes, but it transported Anna to a different world. Alejandro lived in one of Madrid's most elegant neighborhoods in a stately old building, with a uniformed doorman who greeted him with obvious respect. If the doorman was surprised to see the distinguished maestro accompanied by a disheveled young woman carrying a violin case and bags of cafe food, he didn't show it. The guest apartment was on the 3rd floor, accessible through a separate entrance from Alejandro's own much larger home. As promised, it was small but beautiful. A living area with a piano, a tiny but well-equipped kitchen, a bedroom, and a modern bathroom. To Anna, who had been sleeping on a thin mat in a church back room, it looked like a palace. "The closet has some basic clothing," Alejandro explained, opening a door to reveal several simple but elegant outfits. "They belong to my wife's niece who stays here occasionally. I think they'll fit you well enough for now." Anna turned to him, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by being prepared for that audition," he said briskly. "Get cleaned up, get some rest, and come to my apartment at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll begin your preparation." He moved toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Anna? They won't make it easy for you, regardless of my recommendation. The orchestra world can be traditional. Prepare yourself for that." With those somewhat ominous words, he left her alone in the apartment. Anna stood motionless for a few moments, afraid that if she moved or spoke, the dream would dissolve and she'd wake up back on her mat at the church. Then her practical nature reasserted itself. Dream or not, she wasn't going to waste hot water and clean towels. An hour later, freshly showered and dressed in borrowed clothes that fit surprisingly well, Anna sat cross-legged on the comfortable bed, eating the second helping of paella Javier had sent with her. Her wet hair hung down her back, and her skin felt almost strange to her, too clean, too soft after weeks of hasty wash-ups in public restrooms. Her violin lay beside her on the bed, the case open. She ran her fingers lightly over the strings, not playing, just reconnecting. She would need to practice tonight, get back the stamina she had lost during these difficult weeks. But first she needed to savor this moment, this unbelievable turn in her fortune. Morning came too quickly. Anna had practiced late into the night, pushing through the stiffness in her fingers, reacquainting herself with pieces she hadn't played since leaving the conservatory. She had fallen asleep with the violin still beside her, waking just in time to dress and cross the hall to Alejandro's apartment at precisely 9 o'clock. His home was elegant but not ostentatious, filled with books, records, and framed photographs from his conducting career. Alejandro with famous musicians, receiving awards, standing before the world's great orchestras. Most striking was a grand piano in the center of the main room, its lid raised, sheet music already arranged on the stand. "Good morning," Alejandro greeted her. "I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you," Anna replied, though the few hours of sleep she'd managed had been filled with anxiety dreams about the audition. "Good. We have much to do." He gestured to a chair positioned near the piano. "The audition will have 3 components: a Bach solo piece of your choice, a concerto movement they will specify, and orchestral excerpts for sight reading. We'll start with Bach. What will you play?" Anna had thought about this during her late-night practice. "The chaconne from Partita No. 2. Alejandro's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ambitious. It's considered one of the most difficult solo violin pieces ever written." "It's also one of the most beautiful," Anna said, "and I know it by heart. I played it for my final recital last year at the conservatory." "Very well." Alejandro nodded. "Let's hear it." Anna took a deep breath, positioned her violin, and began to play. The piece started simply enough, but soon expanded into a complex exploration of everything a violin could do, requiring not just technical skill, but deep musical understanding. It was like a journey through human emotion, grief, acceptance, hope, transcendence, all without a single word being spoken. When she finished, Alejandro was silent for a long moment. Then he said just one word. Again. Anna played it again. And again. And again. Each time Alejandro stopped her to correct something. A rushed passage, an uneven trill. A phrase that could be shaped more expressively. His criticism was precise and uncompromising, but never cruel. By the fifth repetition, Anna's arm was aching, but the music was better, deeper, more assured. Enough for now, Alejandro said finally. We'll continue after lunch. The concerto movement will likely be from Mozart or Tchaikovsky. They're traditional choices for Philharmonic auditions. Do you have a preference for which we work on first? Anna thought for a moment. Mozart. It seems simpler, but that makes every small mistake more obvious. Alejandro smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him that day. Precisely. Mozart leaves nowhere to hide. Very good. Now let's eat something before we continue. You'll need your strength for what's ahead. As they moved to the dining room where a light lunch had been prepared, Anna realized something important. For the first time in months, she was thinking like a musician again, not like a hungry, desperate person trying to survive. Whatever happened with the audition, Alejandro had already given her back that much of herself. And for that alone, she would be forever grateful. The week passed in a blur of practice, criticism, improvement, and more practice. Anna's days fell into a rhythm. Breakfast at 7, practice with Alejandro from 9 until lunch, a short break, then more practice until dinner. After dinner, she would continue practicing alone until her fingers could barely move. Alejandro was a demanding teacher. He accepted nothing less than perfection, sending Anna back to repeat passages dozens of times until they met his standards. Yet there was never any doubt that he believed in her talent. His criticism, though unsparing, was always constructive. Again, he would say after she played through a difficult passage, but this time don't just play the notes, tell the story. What is Mozart saying here? It's a conversation between the violin and the orchestra, not a speech. By the 5th day, Anna's confidence was growing. The borrowed clothes no longer felt strange on her body. The regular meals had brought color back to her cheeks. Most importantly, her playing had improved dramatically. The technical skills were still there. They had never truly left. But now they served the music rather than just displaying her abilities. You're nearly ready, Alejandro told her after a particularly good run-through of the Tchaikovsky concerto. Tomorrow we'll focus on the orchestral excerpts. They're likely to ask for passages from Beethoven's Fifth, something from Brahms, perhaps a bit of Mahler. Anna nodded, trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach. The audition was just 2 days away. Will they know? She asked suddenly. About where you found me, I mean? Alejandro considered the question. I've told the committee only that you're a former student of Elena Navarro, who left the conservatory for personal reasons. Your circumstances are your own business. He paused. But Anna, even if they knew, it wouldn't matter. The screen ensures that. The screen? Yes, the preliminary round is conducted behind a screen. The committee won't see you, only hear you. It's meant to reduce bias, he smiled slightly. Though in your case, seeing a young woman might actually work in your favor. The Philharmonic has been criticized for its lack of female musicians. Anna thought about this. A blind audition. Just her and her violin, judged solely on the music they created together. There was something pure about that idea. Something that appealed to her deeply. How many people will be auditioning? She asked. For these 2 positions? At least 30, possibly more. Many of them will be graduates from top conservatories across Europe. Some will have experience with smaller orchestras. He watched her face carefully. Does that frighten you? Anna considered the question honestly. A little, she admitted. But also, it feels right somehow. Like a test I need to pass, not just for the job, but for myself. Alejandro nodded, satisfied with her answer. Good. Now, again from the development section. And remember what I said about the conversation between soloist and orchestra. The day before the audition, Alejandro insisted that Anna rest. Your fingers know what to do, he told her. Practicing more now will only tire them. Take the day to relax, clear your mind. Go for a walk. Look at art. Remind yourself why music matters. Anna tried to follow his advice, spending the morning at the Prado Museum, losing herself in the paintings. But her mind kept returning to the audition, to all the ways it could go wrong. What if her nerves got the better of her? What if she made a simple mistake? What if the judges hated her interpretation? By afternoon, she couldn't stand the tension any longer. She returned to the apartment and took out her violin, not to practice the audition pieces but simply to play, letting her fingers choose the music. She ended up playing a folk melody her grandmother had taught her, something simple but beautiful. It calmed her, reminding her of why she had fallen in love with the violin in the first place. That evening, Javier from the cafe called unexpectedly. "I wanted to wish you luck tomorrow," he said. "The customers keep asking when you'll be back to play for us." "You told people about the audition?" Anna asked, surprised. "Of course. We're all very proud. A regular from our little cafe auditioning for the Philharmonic." His enthusiasm was so genuine that Anna couldn't help but smile. "We'll be thinking of you tomorrow. And remember, whether you get in or not, you always have a place to play here." The call left Anna feeling strangely comforted. No matter what happened tomorrow, she wasn't back at square one. She had people who believed in her, a place where her music was valued. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was far more than she had a week ago. The morning of the audition dawned clear and cold. Anna woke early, her stomach too knotted with nerves to eat more than a few bites of toast. Alejandro, sensing her anxiety, kept conversation to a minimum as his driver took them to the concert hall where the Philharmonic performed and rehearsed. The backstage area was buzzing with activity when they arrived. At least 20 other violinists were already there, some playing quietly in corners, others pacing nervously, a few chatting with apparent confidence. Anna felt immediately out of place. These musicians looked polished, professional, secure in their belonging here. Would they be able to tell just by looking at her that a week ago she'd been homeless? Alejandro seemed to read her thoughts. "Remember," he said quietly, "behind the screen only the music matters." A woman with a clipboard approached them. "Contestant number 18? She asked, looking at Anna. "Yes, that's me. You'll be called in approximately 40 minutes. You can warm up in room 3 down that hallway." She looked at Alejandro with surprise. "Maestro Vega, I didn't expect to see you here today." "Just supporting a promising talent, Lucia," he replied smoothly. "Is Antonio around?" "The conductor is with the committee, yes." Her tone cooled slightly. "I'll let him know you're here." After she left, Anna raised an eyebrow at Alejandro. "Not a fan?" He shrugged. "Antonio Bernal was my assistant conductor before he took over when I retired. Our relationship is complicated. But don't worry about that now. Go warm up. I'll wait here." Room 3 was little more than a closet with a chair, but it offered privacy. Anna took out her violin and began her warm-up routine, playing scales and arpeggios until her fingers felt limber and responsive. She ran through a few tricky passages from the audition pieces, not trying to play them perfectly, but just making sure her muscle memory was intact. Too soon, the woman with the clipboard was at the door. "You're up next," she announced. "Follow me." Anna put her violin under her arm and followed, her heart pounding. The woman led her to a door labeled "Audition in Progress." "When you hear the bell, enter and go directly behind the screen," she instructed. "The committee won't speak to you directly. You'll hear the requirements through a speaker. Understood?" Anna nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. "Good luck," the woman said, her professional demeanor softening briefly before she walked away. Anna stood before the door, waiting for the bell, trying to steady her breathing. This was it, the moment that could change her life forever. All her years of practice, all her sacrifices, her family's sacrifices had led to this point. The bell rang, a soft chime that somehow cut through all the noise in Anna's head. She opened the door and walked into the audition room. It was larger than she had expected, with perfect acoustics that made even her footsteps sound musical. A large black screen stood in the center of the room. Anna walked behind it as instructed, finding a single chair waiting for her. "Contestant 18, a male voice announced through the speaker. "You will begin with the Bach Chaconne from Partita No. 2, followed by the first movement of the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. Then we will provide orchestral excerpts for sight reading. You may begin when ready." Anna closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and raised her violin. The familiar weight of it against her shoulder was reassuring. This was what she knew, what she had always known. Whatever happened next, she would play her heart out. She began the Bach, the notes flowing from her violin like a prayer. The piece was technically demanding, but Anna had played it so many times during the past week that her fingers found the notes without conscious thought, leaving her mind free to focus on the music itself. She poured everything into it, Her recent struggles, her hopes, her determination to prove herself worthy of this chance. When the last note of the Bach faded away, there was a moment of silence from the other side of the screen. Then, please continue with the Tchaikovsky. Anna shifted mental gears, moving from the introspective world of Bach to the passionate romanticism of Tchaikovsky. This piece was a showstopper, designed to display technical brilliance, and Anna played it with all the fire she could muster, her bow dancing across the strings. During a particularly difficult passage, her finger slipped slightly, producing a note that was just a hair off pitch. Anna's heart jumped, but she didn't allow herself to pause or show any reaction. Instead, she played through it, making the next phrase even more expressive to compensate. When she finished, there was a longer silence. Then papers rustled, and a different voice, a woman's this time, said, "We'll now move to the orchestral excerpts. Please sight read the following." A small door in the side of the screen opened, and a hand pushed through several sheets of music. Anna took them and quickly scanned the pages. As Alejandro had predicted, there were selections from Beethoven, Brahms, and Mahler, challenging passages that required not just technical skill, but an understanding of how the violin part fit within the larger orchestral texture. Anna took a breath and began the first excerpt. This was the part she was most nervous about. She hadn't performed with an orchestra since a student concert over a year ago. But as she played, she heard Alejandro's voice in her head. "Tell the story. What is the composer saying here?" She focused on making each excerpt tell its story, even when she wasn't perfectly familiar with the piece. When she made a small mistake in the Mahler, she kept going, maintaining the character of the music. When she finished the last excerpt, the room fell silent again. "Thank you, contestant 18, the male voice finally said. "That will be all for now. Results of the preliminary round will be posted this afternoon. Those advancing to the final round will audition again tomorrow." "Thank you," Anna said, though she wasn't sure if they could hear her. She gathered the music, returned it through the small door in the screen, and walked out the same way she had entered. Her legs felt shaky and her arms were tired from holding the violin for so long, but her mind was strangely calm. She had done her best. The rest was out of her hands. Alejandro was waiting for her in the hallway. "Well?" he asked simply. Anna took a deep breath. "I made a few mistakes. But I played like myself." The old conductor nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "Then whatever happens next, you've already succeeded." The waiting was worse than the audition. Anna and Alejandro returned to his apartment, where Anna paced restlessly while Alejandro pretended to read a book. Neither spoke much. What was there to say? The music had been played. The judgment was now in others' hands. "What time will they post the results?" Anna asked, breaking a long silence. Alejandro checked his watch. "Around 4 o'clock. Another hour." He set his book aside. "Sit down, Anna, your pacing is making me dizzy." She sat, but her fingers kept moving, playing an invisible violin. "I keep thinking about that mistake in the Tchaikovsky." It wasn't huge, but they must have noticed. "Everyone makes mistakes," Alejandro said calmly. "What matters is how you recovered." "Did you panic? Stop playing? Apologize mid-performance?" "No, I just kept going. That's what professionals do." He picked up his book again. "Now stop torturing yourself and have some tea." The hour crawled by. Finally, at 10 minutes to 4, Alejandro's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then hung up without saying more than, "Thank you." Anna stared at him, her heart pounding. "Well?" "That was Lucia from the committee," he said, his face revealing nothing. "The results have been posted early." "And?" Anna could barely breathe. Alejandro's serious expression suddenly broke into a smile. "You've advanced to the final round. 6 candidates out of 32 were selected." "You're among them," Anna gasped, then covered her mouth with her hands. For a moment she couldn't speak. Tears sprang to her eyes. Tears of relief, of joy, of exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I knew it," Alejandro said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "Now the hard part begins. The final round is tomorrow morning at 10. No screen this time. They'll see you and you'll play with piano accompaniment." Anna nodded, wiping away her tears. "What should I prepare?" "The same pieces, but they'll focus more on musicality than technical precision. And they'll ask questions about your background, your musical philosophy, where you see yourself in 5 years." He leaned forward. They're not just choosing a violinist, Anna. They're choosing a colleague. That night, Anna could barely sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind racing through all the questions they might ask, all the ways she might answer. What would they think when they saw how young she was? Would they ask why she had left the conservatory? Should she be honest about her recent circumstances or hide them? Morning came too soon, and with it a fresh wave of anxiety. Anna dressed carefully in the best of the borrowed clothes, a simple black dress that looked professional without being too formal. She pulled her hair back into a neat bun and even applied a touch of makeup she found in the bathroom cabinet. The face that looked back at her from the mirror seemed both familiar and strange. The same Anna, but somehow more grown up, more serious. "You look like a professional musician," Alejandro said approvingly when she emerged from the guest apartment. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," Anna replied, picking up her violin case. The final round was held in a smaller room, with a grand piano in one corner and a table where 5 people sat watching as Anna entered. She recognized the woman with the clipboard, Lucia, but the others were strangers. An older man with silver hair at his temples sat in the center, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Ana Vasquez?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I'm Antonio Bernal, conductor of the Madrid Philharmonic." So this was Alejandro's former assistant, now his successor. "Please make yourself comfortable. Our pianist Luis will accompany you for the concerto." A kind-faced man at the piano nodded to her. Anna smiled back, grateful for the small gesture of friendliness. "We'd like to start with the Bach again," Antonio said, "then move to the Tchaikovsky. After that, we have some questions for you. Whenever you're ready." Anna positioned her violin, took a breath, and began to play. This time it was different. Without the screen, she could see their reactions. A raised eyebrow here, a slight nod there. The Bach seemed to flow from some deeper place within her, each note carrying the weight of her journey, the hunger, the humiliation, the unexpected kindness of strangers, the demanding preparation, the sleepless nights. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then Antonio nodded to Luis, who positioned his hands over the keyboard. "The Tchaikovsky, please." The concerto was a dialogue between violin and piano, and Luis proved to be a sensitive partner, matching his playing to Anna's interpretation. She played with more confidence now, her earlier success giving her the freedom to take small risks, to put more of herself into the music. The passage where she had made a mistake yesterday arrived. This time her fingers found the notes perfectly, and she couldn't help the small smile that crossed her face. When the final notes died away, Antonio leaned forward. "Thank you, Ms. Vasquez, that was quite moving. Now we have some questions." He consulted a notepad. "Your application says you studied at the Royal Conservatory until recently. May I ask why you left?" Anna hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Financial reasons, sir. My family could no longer afford the tuition after my father lost his job." There were sympathetic nods around the table. "And how have you continued your musical education since then?" asked a woman seated next to Antonio. "It's been challenging," Anna admitted. "Until very recently I practiced wherever I could. Parks, church steps, sometimes just mentally going through the pieces when I couldn't play." She paused. "For the past week I've been fortunate enough to receive guidance from Maestro Vega." Antonio's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Alejandro. "And before that? Were you performing anywhere?" "Teaching, perhaps." The moment of truth. Anna took a deep breath. "Before Maestro Vega found me, I was playing on the street. The night he heard me, I had asked to play in a cafe in exchange for food." A ripple of surprise went through the committee. Antonio studied her face. "I see. That must have been difficult." "It was," Anna acknowledged, "but it taught me something important. When you're playing for your next meal, you discover what music really means to you. For me, it's never been about recognition or applause. It's about the music itself, what it says, how it connects people, how it can transform a moment." Her words hung in the air. The committee members exchanged glances. "One final question, Ms. Vask.